snow began falling over Madison, as though the sky had decided to scatter blessings across the quiet Christmas Eve. Each flake drifted down with a softness that made the city seem gentler than usual, covering rooftops and sidewalks along the streets near Capitol Square. The lamps that circled the square glowed like warm beacons, giving the night a comforting sheen. For the people living there, it was a familiar sight, the kind of winter evening that reminded folks of old holiday gatherings, steaming cocoa, and the comfort of home. But for one man moving quickly beneath those lights, the moment carried a mixture of hope and fear. Daniel Carter tightened the collar of his thin jacket and pushed forward through the drifting snow. His boots, worn from years of work, pressed deep into the fresh powder as he hurried along East Washington Avenue. Every few steps, he glanced down at the small, mittened hand clasped in his own. Little Lily kept up without complaint, though her breath came out in short puffs that fogged the cold air. Her pink hat bobbed with every stride, a bright spot of courage in the icy evening. The wind stung against Daniel's cheeks. It had been a long time since he allowed himself to feel nervous about anything other than bills or doctor appointments. Yet tonight something stirred inside him, something he thought had faded after Margaret passed. A quiet spark urged him forward, even while the weight of the world settled across his shoulders. He was late, terribly late, and the thought of someone waiting for him filled his stomach with a knot he could not untangle. He whispered to himself, almost like a prayer, hoping the woman he was supposed to meet had not given up already. Daniel had never imagined he would agree to a blind date, let alone one arranged by an app his friend Tommy insisted on setting up. He was not the kind of man who went looking for romance anymore. Life had become a series of duties and long days, each one shaped around providing for Lily. Still, when the messages from a woman named Eleanor began appearing, gentle and thoughtful, something inside him responded. Her questions were simple yet heartfelt. She asked about favorite winter memories, childhood traditions, and the small joys he shared with Lily. He found himself typing long replies at night after putting his daughter to bed, feeling a warmth he had not felt in years. He did not know then who she really was. He only knew her words made him feel seen, something rare for a man who spent most days fixing leaky faucets and shoveling driveways to make ends meet. Those messages became a quiet light in his evenings, a reminder that even a heart bruised by loss could still recognize kindness. Now, making his way through the snow toward Prairie Lantern Café, Daniel felt the weight of the night pressing down on him. Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor who often looked after Lily, had fallen ill only hours before the meeting. 3 other babysitters were busy with family gatherings. Tommy was out of town with his parents in Green Bay. Every path seemed to close before him, leaving him with only one choice: bring Lily along and hope for understanding. Lily looked up at him with wide, earnest eyes. She did not fully grasp the importance of the evening, but she sensed her father's worry. She squeezed his hand gently, offering silent comfort the way children often do without realizing their strength. Daniel glanced at her and managed a small smile. Her presence had carried him through many dark days. If anyone could help him face the unknown, it was this little girl trotting bravely beside him. The snow thickened as they neared the corner where the cafe stood. Its windows glowed with a warm amber light that spilled onto the sidewalk. Through the glass, shadows moved softly. People inside chatted over warm drinks, wrapped in the comfort of the holiday spirit. Daniel slowed, drawing a deep breath. He knew he would arrive looking anything but prepared. His jacket was damp from the walk. Lily's scarf had loosened. His nerves felt tangled beyond repair, yet the hope he carried, small but steady, refused to let him turn away. Somewhere inside that cafe sat Eleanor, a woman he had spoken with only through a lit screen but whose words had eased his loneliness in ways he never expected. He did not know what she would think of a man who arrived late with a child and a coat that had seen too many winters. He only knew he had to show up. For her, for himself, for the possibility that life still held room for new beginnings. With Lily beside him and the snow swirling quietly around them, Daniel stepped toward the glowing doorway, unaware that this single step would begin a story that would reshape all 3 of their lives. Inside the Prairie Lantern Café, warmth drifted through the air like a familiar melody. The smell of cinnamon and fresh pastries wrapped around every table, making the place feel more like a friend's living room than a business. Lanterns made from copper sheets lined the shelves, their soft glow casting amber shades on the brick walls. Near the front windows, people gathered with steaming drinks cupped between chilled hands, their laughter brushing gently against the low hum of holiday music. At a small table near the far corner sat Eleanor Brooks. Her cream-colored coat hung neatly over the back of her chair, and a cup of peppermint tea rested in front of her. Steam had long faded from its surface. She had arrived early, much earlier than she cared to admit, her nerves urging her through the café doors before she was ready. Now, after more than an hour of waiting, she stared at the tea, wondering why she remained in a place where hope felt thinner with each passing minute. Eleanor was not used to waiting for anyone. Her life as the head of Brooks and Alder Designs revolved around deadlines and efficiency. She moved through meetings and negotiations with precision, always knowing her direction. Yet tonight, she found herself sitting still, hands folded neatly in her lap, listening to footsteps and glancing every time the cafe door opened. Something about Daniel's messages had stayed with her. His stories about late-night board games with Lily, his memories of winters in Wisconsin with Margaret, his quiet humor even in hardship. She sensed sincerity in every word, a quality she seldom met in her world of polished appearances. As minutes stretched into long moments, she began to wonder whether she had misunderstood everything. Maybe she had built a dream around someone who did not see the same possibility. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear and forced a steady breath. She did not want to feel foolish, especially on Christmas Eve, a night that already carried its own loneliness. The barista, Janet Whitmore, passed by with a gentle smile. The woman knew many regulars by name, and though Eleanor was not one, Janet sensed her unease. She placed a small ginger cookie beside the untouched tea and offered a tender nod before returning to the counter. The gesture warmed Eleanor like a soft blanket draped around her shoulders, yet it also deepened the ache in her heart. She felt out of place, waiting for a man who might already have decided not to come. 7:00 slipped into 7:30. A couple entered the cafe, shaking snow from their coats before settling near the door. A group of college students laughed near the back. Still no sign of Daniel. Eleanor folded her hands more tightly, steadying herself against the disappointment pressing inside her chest. She reminded herself that life had taught her to expect cancellations, broken promises, and conversations that led nowhere. She should leave, she told herself. Stand up, put on her coat, go back to her quiet penthouse overlooking Lake Mendota and carry on the way she always had. But something kept her seated. A small spark, stubborn yet gentle, refused to let go. She wanted to believe that Daniel was not the type of man who vanished. She wanted to believe that the kindness in his words came from a true place. So she waited, heart wavering between courage and resignation. Then the cafe door swung open, letting a rush of snow-filled air spill across the floor. Conversations paused, faces turned, and in that instant, Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her breath. A man stood in the doorway, breathless, coat soaked from the cold, hair dusted by winter. Beside him stood a little girl in a rosy hat, her eyes wide with both shyness and excitement. Eleanor's heartbeat stumbled. She recognized the man immediately. Daniel had come after all, looking every bit as real as the words he had shared with her. For a moment, the entire Prairie Lantern Cafe seemed to hold its breath. Even the soft hum of holiday music felt quieter as Daniel guided Lily inside, gently brushing snow from her coat sleeve. The warm air from the heaters wrapped around them like a welcoming embrace, melting the frost caught in their hair. Daniel lifted his gaze, searching across the room, unsure of what he would find. Then his eyes met Eleanor's. The tension in his shoulders loosened just enough for him to exhale. He wanted to speak, wanted to explain the chaos that led them here, but words tangled in his throat. All he could manage was a quiet greeting as he moved toward her table, Lily still clutching his hand. Eleanor rose slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition, then to something gentler. She studied Daniel's tired face, the damp sleeves of his jacket, the small girl leaning against him. Instead of the disappointment she had braced herself for, she felt a wave of understanding sweep through her chest. She had grown accustomed to people hiding their truths, presenting glossy versions of themselves. Yet here stood a man carrying his reality openly, no mask, no attempt to impress. Something about that honesty touched her deeply. Daniel cleared his throat. His voice came out rough, edged with fatigue. "I am sorry. We tried our best to get here sooner. I know it looks like I did not value this evening, but that is far from the truth." Before he could continue, Eleanor motioned to the chairs. "Sit first, both of you, then tell me everything." Her tone held no judgment, only sincerity, like a door quietly opening instead of closing. Janet, ever observant, stepped forward with a welcoming smile. "Hot chocolates for the little one and her father, and another warm tea for our patient friend." Eleanor nodded gratefully. Daniel helped Lily out of her coat, revealing her cheerful sweater with tiny snowflakes stitched across the front. The child slid onto the seat beside him, eyes roaming the cafe with fascination. After a steadying breath, Daniel began to explain. Each detail poured out. Mrs. Alvarez waking up with a fever, the failed calls to babysitters, the broken-down bus that stranded them several blocks from home, the hurried walk through heavy snow, Lily's scraped knee. Every twist of the evening spilled into the air between them, accompanied by the quiet shame of a man accustomed to shouldering burdens alone. Eleanor listened with a stillness born from genuine care. Her gaze never drifted or softened with pity. Instead, she watched him with the kind of attention that made Daniel feel lighter with every passing moment. When he finished, he lowered his eyes, waiting for the disappointment he felt certain would follow. But Eleanor leaned in, her voice steady and warm. "Thank you for telling me. That could not have been easy. And thank you for coming, even when everything seemed to work against you." Daniel blinked, surprised. "You are not upset." "Upset," Eleanor shook her head gently. "You showed up carrying the truth of your life, even when doing so made you vulnerable. That says more about your character than arriving on time ever could." Lily, who had been sipping her hot chocolate with quiet concentration, suddenly lifted her head. "Daddy ran so fast to be here. I told him you would still be waiting." Her small voice held such certainty that Eleanor felt her throat tighten. Eleanor turned to the child. "And you were right. I was here." The girl beamed, pleased with herself, and returned to her drink. For the first time that evening, Daniel felt the knot inside him loosen completely. Something warm settled in his chest, a feeling he had not invited but could not ignore. The three of them sat together with a quiet ease that surprised them all. Snow tapped gently against the window panes. Lanterns cast soft golden circles across the table, and for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt the faint promise of belonging, as if this simple meeting in a small cafe might be the beginning of something none of them had dared to imagine. The warmth inside Prairie Lantern Cafe slowly settled around the three of them like a familiar quilt. With every passing minute, the earlier tension eased, replaced by a gentle comfort that felt almost like fate nudging them closer. Eleanor cradled her fresh cup of tea between her palms, letting the heat seep into her fingers. Across from her, Daniel finally began to relax, the exhaustion etched in his features softening as the weight of the evening lifted bit by bit. Lily swung her small legs under the chair, humming softly to herself as she sipped another mouthful of cocoa. Every so often, she glanced up at Eleanor with innocent curiosity, as if studying someone she wanted to understand. Her presence added a sweetness to the air, the sort of gentle charm only children possess. Eleanor leaned slightly forward, her voice warm. "Lily, your father tells me you like to draw. Is that true?" The little girl nodded with enthusiasm. "I draw lots of things. Birds and snowmen and houses with big windows so sunlight can get inside." Daniel smiled faintly, pride showing in his tired eyes. "She fills every scrap of paper she can find with pictures. Half our fridge is covered in her drawings." Eleanor laughed softly, taken by the image. "Houses with big windows, that sounds like a beautiful idea." Lily brightened. "Daddy says windows help people feel less alone. You can see the sky and the trees even when you stay indoors." The child's words reached Eleanor with unexpected force. For a moment, she felt the echo of her own childhood in a small Wisconsin town, years before success built walls around her life. She pictured her mother opening curtains every morning, insisting that sunlight made the day kinder. Hearing Lily speak that way tugged at memories Eleanor thought she had buried long ago. Daniel watched Eleanor carefully, unsure of what she might be thinking. He still feared she would view his life as a burden, yet something about her steady gaze made him believe that maybe she stood on the same emotional ground as he did, just from a different direction. Eleanor cleared her throat gently. "Your drawings must bring a lot of light into your home," she said. Lily grinned. "Daddy puts them on the fridge even when they look funny." "Funny," Daniel shook his head. "They never look funny. Your drawings make our home feel alive." Eleanor observed the exchange with quiet admiration. She noticed the tender way Daniel brushed a stray curl from Lily's forehead, the care in his eyes, the gentle firmness in his voice. It was obvious that this man loved his daughter with a depth words could not fully express. That devotion touched Eleanor in a place she rarely allowed others to see. Janet approached their table again, wiping her hands on her apron. "Everything all right over here?" Eleanor nodded. "Everything is perfect. Thank you." Janet studied the three of them for a moment, a slow smile forming as though she sensed a story unfolding. She left them with a fresh tray of cookies shaped like stars. Daniel looked at Eleanor with a mixture of gratitude and hesitation. "I know this is not the evening you pictured." She met his eyes, her tone assuring. "It is better than anything I imagined. Life rarely follows our plans. Sometimes the unexpected moments turn out to be the ones we needed most." Daniel absorbed her words, feeling something warm gather in his chest. Her acceptance felt like a soft place to rest, a kindness he had not known outside his own home for years. The three of them sat together while snow continued drifting past the windows. Their conversation deepened in small, steady steps, moving from holiday traditions to memories of childhood winters, each shared story weaving another thread between their lives. As the lanterns glowed tenderly around them, the night shifted into something none of them could quite name yet. A quiet beginning took root, fragile but sincere, as though destiny itself had paused long enough to say that all three of them were exactly where they were meant to be. As the minutes drifted by, the Prairie Lantern Café grew quieter. Customers bundled up and stepped back into the snowy night, leaving behind the soft jingling of the doorbell and the fading scent of cinnamon. Janet dimmed the lantern slightly, giving the room a mellow glow that made the evening feel even more intimate. Only a handful of patrons remained, scattered across the warm space like gentle echoes. Daniel leaned back in his chair, allowing himself to appreciate the rare stillness settling around them. For the first time that night, he no longer felt the need to apologize for his late arrival or the state of his jacket. He simply existed in the moment, enjoying the comfort he had not expected to find. Eleanor rested her elbows lightly on the table. There was something different in her expression now, something softer. Her eyes, usually sharp from years of navigating boardrooms and negotiations, carried a quiet shimmer. She studied Daniel as though she had found a piece of truth she did not know she was missing. "I want to ask you a question, Daniel," she said after a thoughtful pause. "What made you agree to meet me on Christmas Eve, instead of waiting for another day?" Daniel considered her words, then glanced at Lily, who was focused on arranging pieces of a sugar cookie into a neat little pattern. He took a gentle breath. "I chose tonight because Christmas used to be the time Margaret and I reminded each other that hope does not disappear, even when life feels heavy. After she passed, I avoided the holiday. It reminded me of what I lost. But talking with you these past few weeks made me feel something I have not felt in a long while. I thought maybe it was time to try again." Eleanor listened carefully, her hands tightening slightly around her cup. The honesty in his voice washed through her like a quiet wave. The remarks were not rehearsed hints or polished lines meant to charm. They came straight from a heart that had weathered storms yet still held space for tenderness. "Thank you for telling me," she replied softly. "Sometimes hearing someone else speak their truth makes it easier to look at our own." Daniel tilted his head, unsure of her meaning. "Did you stop celebrating Christmas too?" For a moment, Eleanor did not answer. She looked toward the window where snow continued drifting past the glass, each flake catching the lantern light before melting against the pane. "My career grew fast," she finally said. "Faster than I knew how to handle. I used to think success would fill the quiet corners in my life, but the more I achieved, the more those corners grew. Holidays became meetings, dinners turned into networking events. I forgot what it felt like to share an evening with someone who saw me simply as a person." She glanced back at Daniel, offering a small, vulnerable smile. "I suppose tonight I wanted to remember what it feels like to be human again." Daniel felt something shift inside him. Her confession surprised him. From her photographs, her confident messages, and the polished way she carried herself, he had imagined a woman untouched by loneliness. But beneath the surface, she was as familiar with solitude as he was. The realization made her seem even more real. Lily suddenly pushed a cookie toward Eleanor. "This one is for you. It is shaped like a star." Eleanor accepted the treat with a delighted laugh. "Thank you, Lily. It is beautiful." The child nodded with satisfaction, pleased her gift meant something. Daniel watched the exchange, moved by the easy connection forming between them. In the faint glow of the lanterns, the scene felt almost like a memory taking shape, the kind that stays in a person's heart long after the moment passes. He met Eleanor's gaze and saw a quiet invitation there, a subtle recognition that they were two people standing at the edge of something gentle and new. Outside, the snowfall grew quieter, as if the entire city leaned in to listen, and for the first time in many years, Daniel sensed that the night was shifting from sorrow to possibility, from loneliness to the first faint whisper of belonging. The evening continued to settle into a gentle calm as the café neared closing time. Janet moved quietly among the tables, stacking empty cups and wiping crumbs from wooden surfaces polished by years of conversation. Outside, snow softened the world beyond the windows, wrapping the street in a peaceful hush. It was the kind of winter night that felt suspended in time, as though the world slowed enough for hearts to finally speak. Daniel rested his hands on the table, looking far less guarded than when he had first walked in. His earlier worry had melted away, replaced by a subtle sense of peace he could not fully explain. Across from him, Eleanor watched him with thoughtful eyes that seemed to hold both strength and gentleness in equal measure. "I am glad you stayed," she said quietly. "Many people would have given up after facing so many obstacles." Daniel offered a humble smile. "Lily is the brave one. She told me we would make it, and she does not say things unless she believes them." Lily, hearing her name, glanced up from tracing shapes in the condensation on her mug. She gave them both a bright grin before turning back to her little drawings. Eleanor's gaze softened further. "She is a remarkable child." Daniel nodded. "She has been my guiding light since the day she was born. Even during the hardest moments, she always finds a way to remind me that tomorrow brings another chance." Eleanor listened with a tenderness that came from recognizing a truth deeper than words. Daniel's devotion to his daughter was not something performed or polished. It flowed naturally in his every gesture. The way he tucked Lily's scarf corner into her coat earlier, the soft tone he used when speaking to her, the quiet pride in his eyes. It revealed the kind of love that formed the steady backbone of a home. Janet approached them again and set a few fresh napkins on the table. "We will be closing soon, but you are welcome to stay a little longer while I finish up." Her smile carried a knowing warmth, as if she sensed the importance of the evening. She walked back toward the counter, humming an old carol that floated through the room like a gentle lullaby. Daniel shifted slightly, as though gathering the courage to speak. "I should say this before the night ends. I never wanted to arrive looking like I rushed through a snowstorm with no plan. I wanted to meet you with my best foot forward, even if that foot has been worn thin by life. But everything fell apart tonight, and all I could do was try my best to get here." Eleanor leaned in, her tone steady. "Daniel, showing up as you are is not something to apologize for. I have spent years surrounded by perfect surfaces, polished answers, and people who present only what they think I want to see. But you brought truth to this table. That matters to me more than you know." Her sincerity pressed gently against his guarded heart. He met her eyes, seeing a reflection of his own hopes staring back at him. The moment felt fragile, yet filled with quiet strength. Lily suddenly reached for her father's sleeve. "Daddy, look!" She lifted her mug and pointed to the fogged window where she had drawn a row of tiny hearts with her fingertip. They lined up neatly across the glass, glowing softly in the lantern light. Daniel's smile grew, full and warm. "That is beautiful, sweetheart." Eleanor admired the small design. "You have quite the artist there." Lily's creativity seemed to fill the space with a brightness that made the room feel less like a café and more like a home waiting to be rediscovered. Something gentle settled between Daniel and Eleanor at that moment, a shared awareness that their lives had brushed against each other at precisely the right time. The lanterns flickered softly, the snow fell in quiet spirals outside, and the evening held its breath once more, as though inviting them to take the next step forward. The last of the customers slipped out into the snowy street, leaving the Prairie Lantern Café wrapped in a quiet serenity. Janet dimmed several lanterns near the windows, allowing only a handful to glow warmly along the shelves. Their soft light danced upon the copper surfaces, casting gentle reflections across the room. It felt less like a business and more like a sanctuary, a quiet corner of the world where hearts could rest for a moment. Daniel watched the snow swirl outside, the flakes drifting like tiny blessings across the window. The weight of the long day tugged at his shoulders, yet it could not overshadow the calm settling through him. He glanced toward Lily, who was now leaning softly against Eleanor's side, eyelids drooping, one hand resting on the empty cocoa mug. The child's trust came easily, as children instinctively sense where kindness resides. Eleanor lowered her gaze toward Lily, careful not to disturb her. A subtle tenderness crossed her expression, as if she were remembering something delicate from her own childhood. The simple warmth of a small head resting against her made her heart ache in a strangely hopeful way. For someone accustomed to grand achievements and impressive accolades, this quiet moment felt more meaningful than any award she had ever received. Daniel noticed the emotion flicker across her face. He spoke softly, not wanting to break the peaceful stillness surrounding them. "She likes you, I can tell." Eleanor looked up with a gentle smile. "I like her too. She carries a light that fills the room." Daniel nodded, his voice touched with gratitude. "She has carried me through every hard season. Without meaning to, she keeps me moving. Some days I think she saved me more than I saved her." Eleanor let the words linger. Something in Daniel's tone held a depth she rarely encountered. It was not dramatic, not embellished. It was the simple truth of a man who loved with all he had left. She admired the quiet resilience beneath his gentleness. "You are doing a remarkable job," she said, raising her, Life did not give you an easy path, yet she radiates joy. That speaks volumes about you." Daniel looked down, humbled by her sincerity. "Most days, I feel like I am just trying to stay afloat. But thank you. That means more than you might think." A tender quiet settled again before Eleanor continued. "You know, when I was younger, I used to imagine that success would bring a sense of belonging, that once I proved myself, the loneliness would fade. But achievements do not hug you when you get home. They do not sit beside you on quiet nights. They do not keep your heart warm." Daniel listened closely, feeling the raw honesty in her confession. He had sensed her loneliness beneath the polished surface from their earliest messages, but hearing her speak of it softened him even further. "I think everyone needs a place to land," he said. "A place where they feel known. No title can give that. It comes from people, not accomplishments." Eleanor nodded slowly. Her eyes drifted to Lily again, still resting peacefully. When she looked back at Daniel, there was a shift in her gaze, a quiet invitation that neither of them spoke aloud. Outside, the snow thickened, muting the world beyond the glass. Janet approached with a soft smile, wiping her hands on a cloth. "I am closing soon, but take your time. Nights like this deserve a gentle ending." Daniel gathered Lily carefully into his arms, trying not to wake her. He looked toward Eleanor, unsure of what came next, yet sensing the evening was far from over. Eleanor rose from her seat, adjusting her coat with graceful calm. "Let me drive you home. The night is cold, and she should not walk in this weather." Daniel hesitated only long enough to be polite before accepting with a grateful nod. The decision felt natural, as though kindness guided them both toward the same path. And with that, the three of them stepped out of the lantern-lit café and into the soft winter night, carrying with them a quiet connection that had begun to take root beneath the falling snow. The cold air greeted them the moment the door closed behind their backs, though the snowfall had softened into slow, drifting flakes. Eleanor opened her umbrella, shielding Daniel and the sleeping child as they made their way toward the small parking lot behind the café. Streetlights cast golden halos on the snow-covered pavement, giving the night a gentle glow. The quiet hum of distant traffic blended with the faint chime of bells strung along nearby shop windows, reminders that Christmas Eve still held its magic. Eleanor unlocked her car, a sleek silver sedan that contrasted sharply with the humble buildings around it. Daniel hesitated before settling into the passenger seat. He adjusted Lily gently on his lap, making sure her head rested safely against his shoulder. She never stirred, lost in the deep slumber of a child who had given all her energy to the day. As Eleanor started the engine, warmth slowly spread through the vehicle. Daniel murmured, "Thank you again. I know this was not how either of us pictured tonight." Eleanor glanced at him with a soft light in her eyes. "I think tonight turned out exactly as it needed to. Life rarely follows a tidy script. Sometimes its unplanned moments reveal more than we expect." The car pulled out onto the quiet street, tires rolling smoothly over fresh snow. They passed rows of decorated houses, each window glowing with soft lights. Wreaths hung on doors, ribbons curled in gentle loops. From a distance, it looked like a village wrapped in comfort. Daniel watched the scenery drift by. He felt a blend of gratitude and humility, emotions that rose slowly like warm steam from a mug of cocoa. "I worried you would think I was irresponsible," he admitted, showing up late with a child and no explanation. Eleanor shook her head, her voice steady. "What I saw was a father doing everything he could. Anyone can arrive polished and perfect. But someone who shows up despite difficulty, that is someone I want to understand. That is someone I admire." Daniel looked down at Lily, brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. Her small face softened in sleep. The gentle movement filled the car with a sense of tenderness that Eleanor felt deep in her chest. She continued driving, guiding the car through familiar streets. After a moment, she asked softly, "Do you ever think of returning to your old work?" Daniel hesitated. "Sometimes, but the path back feels far away. Most days I'm just trying to keep things steady for Lily. Architecture used to be my dream. Now it feels like another life." Eleanor listened with thoughtful care. "You still speak of it with spark in your voice. That spark does not vanish. It only rests until someone believes in it again." Her words settled into him like warm embers. He had not heard such encouragement in years. For a moment, the road ahead reflected faint hope rather than obstacles. They approached East Gorham Street, where older apartment buildings stood with character etched into their brickwork. Daniel gestured toward one with a flickering porch light. "That is us." Eleanor parked along the curb and turned off the engine. Snow continued drifting gently across the windshield. Neither of them moved to open the door. Instead, a quiet pause settled between them, filled with something tender yet unspoken. Daniel finally said, "I am grateful you waited." Eleanor met his eyes. "I waited because something in your messages felt honest, and because people like you do not cross paths with me often." The moment held steady, as if time paused long enough for each of them to recognize the shift happening within. Then Daniel carefully opened the door and stepped out, cradling Lily close to shield her from the cold. Eleanor walked with him to the building's entrance. Before he climbed the steps, she laid a hand lightly on his arm. "I would like to see you again, if you want that too." Daniel felt warmth spread through him, rich and steady. "I do, more than you know." She smiled gently. "Then we will find a time. And next time, no snowstorm." Snowflakes gathered in her hair. Lantern light reflected in her eyes. And in that quiet glow of a winter night, something new found its place in both their hearts. The days that followed seemed to unfold with a gentle rhythm, as though the city itself sensed something new was slowly taking shape. Christmas passed quietly for Daniel and Lily. They spent the morning opening small gifts wrapped in reused paper, laughing together as Lily discovered a sketchbook and a set of colored pencils Daniel had saved months to buy. In the afternoon, they baked simple cookies that filled their small apartment with warm sweetness. Yet beneath the familiar simplicity of the holiday, Daniel carried a quiet anticipation he had not felt in years. Every time his phone chimed, his heart lifted just a little, wondering if it was Eleanor reaching out. And more often than not, it was. Their messages grew longer, their conversations deeper. Sometimes they spoke about ordinary things, like favorite winter soups or old songs they used to hear on the radio. Other times, their words touched old wounds and hidden dreams. Eleanor shared pieces of her past she rarely revealed, stories of growing up in a small town near Oshkosh where her mother worked double shifts to keep the lights on. She spoke of evenings spent sketching furniture in the dim glow of the kitchen lamp, imagining a future built from determination rather than circumstances. Daniel listened to her words with quiet reverence. Her success no longer felt distant or unreachable. Instead, it felt like the honest result of grit and sacrifice, qualities he understood deeply. And when he shared memories of Margaret, or the fear he carried about doing enough for Lily, Eleanor responded with understanding rather than sympathy, which made him trust her more. A few days after Christmas, Eleanor suggested stopping by with a small care package for Lily. The wind that afternoon swept across Lake Mendota, carrying sharp cold that rattled the window panes. Daniel opened the door to find Eleanor standing there with a modest bag of winter treats, her cheeks pink from the chill. The simple sight of her on his doorstep filled him with warmth he had forgotten existed. Lily greeted Eleanor with the kind of excitement reserved for people who bring light into a child's world. She tugged eagerly at Eleanor's coat sleeve, eager to show her the drawings she had already filled in her new sketchbook. Eleanor followed her to the kitchen table, studying every drawing with genuine admiration. That tenderness made Daniel watch them from the doorway, feeling a deep gratitude move through him. During that visit, Eleanor stayed longer than she expected. They drank tea from mismatched cups while Lily hummed to herself at the table. The apartment was small, the walls slightly worn, but something about the space made Eleanor feel surprisingly at ease. It reminded her of the home she once knew, the one filled with love rather than polished surfaces. After Lily fell asleep on the couch with a blanket tucked around her shoulders, Daniel found himself offering Eleanor a seat beside him. The quiet between them felt comfortable, not empty. Eleanor looked around the room, noticing the little signs of Daniel's life. The stack of library books on architecture, Lily's artwork taped near the kitchen counter, a jar filled with coins they saved for weekend treats. These small details spoke more about him than anything he could have said aloud. "You have made this place warm," she said. "It feels lived in, loved." Daniel looked down, humbled by her observation. "I try. It is not much, but we make the best of it." Eleanor turned her gaze back to him. "You make more than the best of it. You create a home. That takes heart." Their eyes met, and a quiet understanding flowed between them. Something close to hope settled in the space they shared. Eventually, Eleanor stood to leave, though she lingered near the door with a softness in her posture. Daniel walked her out into the cold hallway where the faint hum of the building's heater echoed overhead. "Thank you for today," he said. "Thank you for letting me be part of it," she replied. And with that simple exchange, a tender certainty grew between them, warming the winter evening more than any fire could. January settled over Madison with its usual quiet stillness. Snowbanks along the sidewalks grew taller, shaped by the wind into smooth white drifts that made the neighborhood appear almost untouched. The cold was persistent, the kind that encouraged folks to stay indoors with warm blankets and gentle company. For Daniel and Lily, it was a season filled with small comforts. For Eleanor, it became a season of discovery. She began stopping by more often, though always with an easy grace that never felt intrusive. Sometimes she brought homemade soup she had attempted from an old recipe. Other times it was a simple box of crayons for Lily, or a book she thought Daniel might appreciate. But more than anything, she brought herself, and that presence quietly wove into their lives like a warm thread stitching loose pieces together. Daniel noticed how naturally Eleanor fit into their routines. Lily greeted her with a bright smile each time, treating her visits as something expected rather than surprising. They would sit at the kitchen table together, coloring or chatting about school while Daniel prepared dinner with the modest ingredients he had. The small apartment seemed brighter on those evenings, as though her laughter carried a warmth that the old radiator could not provide. One evening, as snow tapped gently against the window, Eleanor asked if she could help chop vegetables. Daniel hesitated, not wanting her to feel out of place in his cramped kitchen, but she insisted with a playful tilt of her head, so he handed her a cutting board and a knife with a soft smile. She stood beside him, slicing carrots with care. The rhythmic sound reminded Daniel of a memory he had not visited in years. Margaret cutting vegetables beside him on cold nights, humming softly while Lily babbled in her high chair. The memory pressed gently at his heart, not with pain, but with a quiet gratitude for the love he had known and the possibility of new beginnings. Eleanor glanced toward him and caught the thoughtful look in his eyes. She did not pry. Instead, she continued her task with gentle ease, understanding that some memories are best held quietly, like fragile ornaments on a shelf. When dinner was ready, they sat together at the small table with mismatched plates. Lily chattered about school projects, proudly showing them a page from her sketchbook with a drawing of houses lined up along a snowy street. Eleanor admired each shape as though she were studying a masterpiece. After they finished eating, Lily curled up under her blanket on the couch, slowly drifting toward sleep. The apartment grew hushed, filled only with the faint hum of the heater and the soft rise and fall of Lily's breathing. Daniel and Eleanor remained at the table, lingering in the quiet. Outside, the street lamp cast a pale glow across the snow, while inside, warmth gathered between them like an unspoken promise. "You seem more at peace these days," Eleanor said softly, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. Daniel leaned back slightly, reflecting before he answered. "It helps to share the weight. When someone walks beside you, even in small ways, the road feels less heavy." Eleanor lowered her eyes for a moment, touched by his sincerity. "I am glad if I can make the road a little easier." "You have," he replied gently. "More than you know." A tender pause settled between them, the kind that carries meaning without needing explanation. Eleanor felt her heart open in a way she had not expected, as though each evening with Daniel and Lily loosened the quiet loneliness she had carried for years. Daniel studied her expression, sensing her unspoken thoughts. "I am grateful for your presence here. Truly." She lifted her gaze, offering a smile filled with warmth. "And I am grateful for yours." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet comfort of a winter night, both understood that their lives had begun to shift in ways neither had anticipated, not with grand gestures, but with the steady rhythm of shared evenings and gentle companionship, the kind of change that grows softly, just like a seed beneath the snow, waiting for spring. February arrived with gentle snowfall drifting across Madison's frozen lakes, softening the city beneath layers of white. The cold remained steady, but the season carried a quieter beauty now for Daniel. Each week brought Eleanor a little deeper into his world, not because of grand declarations, but through simple evenings, warm conversations, and an ease that formed naturally among the three of them. Lily grew especially attached. Whenever Eleanor visited, the child greeted her with a bright excitement, tugging her toward the couch or her drawing table as though she had been waiting all day. Eleanor responded with patience and tenderness, always willing to listen, always willing to join in the small joys that filled Lily's young life. Watching them together brought Daniel a comfort he had not known in years. One Saturday afternoon, Eleanor invited them to a community winter festival at a nearby park. The event was simple, the kind run by volunteers with homemade signs and local music. Children slid down gentle hills on plastic sleds. Families gathered near fire pits sipping warm cider from paper cups. It felt like the kind of small-town gathering Eleanor rarely experienced anymore. Lily ran ahead to join a group of children building a snow fort. Daniel's eyes followed her with instinctive care, but he allowed her the freedom to play, trusting the cheerful crowd. Eleanor watched Lily too, admiring the child's ability to find joy anywhere she went. "She is full of light," Eleanor said softly. Daniel nodded, his voice touched with quiet pride. "She finds magic in everything, even on hard days." They walked along a path lined with lanterns placed in the snow. The soft glow gave the park a warm, almost nostalgic charm. Couples strolled hand in hand. Groups of older neighbors gathered by the fire pits exchanging stories from past winters. Daniel glanced at Eleanor, wondering how a woman who lived in a polished world of high-rises and design studios could walk so comfortably in a place filled with simple joys. Yet she moved through the festival with ease, smiling warmly at strangers and greeting children who darted past with snow on their boots. A moment later, Lily came racing back toward them, cheeks rosy from the cold. She held a small paper snowflake she had cut at one of the craft tables. "This is for you, Miss Eleanor. I made it myself." Eleanor accepted the gift as though it were crafted from gold. "Thank you, Lily. It is beautiful." Lily beamed and ran off again, returning to her friends with renewed excitement. Daniel noticed Eleanor studying the paper snowflake, her expression softening. "You have a way of making her feel valued," he said. Eleanor looked up thoughtfully. "She deserves to feel seen. Children carry so much wonder inside them. Sometimes adults forget that." His heart warmed at her words. He admired her ability to look at Lily with genuine affection, not as an obligation or a challenge. He admired her willingness to step into their world without hesitation. They continued walking, their steps slow, matching the quiet rhythm of falling snow. Daniel felt a shift stirring within him, something gentle yet certain. The life he had protected so fiercely since Margaret's passing no longer felt closed off. Instead, it felt as though a window had opened, letting in a new breath of possibility. When the afternoon sun began setting, casting soft lavender shades across the sky, Lily returned to them with tired steps and hands cold from the snow. Daniel wrapped her scarf more snugly while Eleanor brushed loose flakes from her coat. Their actions blended seamlessly, as if they were already learning how to share the simple responsibilities of caring for this small family. On the walk back to the car, Lily rested her hand in Eleanor's without hesitation. Eleanor looked down with a warm, surprised smile, then held it gently, matching the child's pace. Daniel watched them walk side by side, their steps quiet in the snow. And in that tender moment, He realized something had shifted far more deeply than he expected. What had begun as a quiet hope on Christmas Eve was blossoming into something steady and real, carried forward by kindness, trust, and the simple act of showing up for one another. March crept into Madison with a mixture of melting snow and lingering winter chill. Patches of grass began to show through the softened drifts, promising that warmer days would eventually arrive. The city shifted from deep winter quiet to early signs of life. Birds returned to tree branches along the roads. Neighbors stepped outside more often, greeting each other with nods and warm scarves wrapped snugly against the cool air. For Daniel, the changing season felt like a reflection of his own heart. Something inside him was waking, stretching, finding room to breathe again. With every passing week, Eleanor's presence became more natural, fitting into his life and Lily's in ways he had not expected but deeply valued. Eleanor, too, felt a change stirring. Her work life remained busy, filled with deadlines and meetings, yet she found herself carving out time she once never believed she had. She left the office earlier some days, choosing conversation over conference calls and laughter over boardroom formality. She visited Daniel's apartment often enough that Lily began setting aside a drawing for her each time, knowing Eleanor would look for it as soon as she walked through the door. One cool evening, Eleanor arrived with a small bag in her hand, cheeks flushed from the brisk wind outside. Daniel welcomed her in with a warm smile while Lily ran forward with bright excitement. "Miss Eleanor, I made something for your office today." Lily held up a colorful picture of tall buildings with wide windows, trees surrounding their base, and a bright sun smiling down from the sky. Eleanor accepted the drawing with care, admiring each detail as though she were holding a treasured memory. "It is wonderful, Lily. I will frame it and hang it beside my desk." Lily beamed, delighted by the promise. Daniel watched the exchange quietly, his heart stirred by how naturally this connection had grown. Eleanor did not treat Lily with distant politeness. She knelt to meet her eye level. She asked questions that truly mattered to a child. She listened. That sincerity touched Daniel deeply. As Lily settled at the table to color another page, Eleanor turned to Daniel with a thoughtful expression. "Would you tell me about the bridge you designed, the one you mentioned weeks ago?" Daniel blinked with surprise. He had not expected her to remember the project. It was something he rarely spoke about, a memory tucked away with equal parts pride and loss. But the curiosity in her eyes encouraged him. "It was a pedestrian bridge planned for a trail near the lake," he began. "I designed it to blend with the natural landscape. Clean lines, simple arches, nothing grand, but something people could walk across and feel connected to the place." Eleanor listened with quiet attentiveness. He spoke about the process, the excitement he felt when the plans were first approved, and the disappointment when the project was halted after his firm closed. As he talked, a spark returned to his voice, something bright and honest. "You loved that work," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "I did, but life changed, and I had to set it aside." For a long moment, Eleanor watched him with a tender understanding. "You still carry that dream. It is not gone. It is waiting." He looked at her, struck by the conviction in her voice. No one had spoken to him that way since long before Margaret fell ill. Her belief in him touched a part of his heart he had kept guarded. Before he could respond, Lily approached, slipping her hand into Eleanor's with natural ease. "I drew you again. Look." The child presented a small sketch of 3 stick figures holding hands under a large sun. Daniel recognized himself, Lily, and Eleanor. The simplicity of it made his breath catch. Eleanor's eyes softened, and she hugged the drawing gently against her chest. "Thank you, Lily. I will treasure it." The evening continued with quiet conversation and the steady comfort of shared company. Outside, the last traces of winter clung to the streets, but inside that small apartment, warmth filled every corner. As the night drew to a close, Daniel walked Eleanor to the door. They lingered there, neither rushing the moment. A gentle understanding passed between them, carried by the soft hum of the hallway light. "Thank you for tonight," he said quietly. She smiled. "Thank you for letting me be part of your world." And as she stepped out into the cool evening air, Daniel felt a deep certainty grow within him. What had begun on a snowy Christmas Eve was becoming something he could no longer deny. As March eased toward its final days, the air over Madison began to soften. Snowbanks shrank little by little, leaving behind small rivers of meltwater trickling along curbs and down storm drains. The scent of damp earth drifted upward, carrying with it the earliest promise of spring. In this quiet transition between seasons, something inside Daniel also shifted, settling into a steadier rhythm he had not felt in a long while. Eleanor's visits continued, weaving gently into the fabric of their days. She still carried the weight of her demanding career, yet she made space for evenings that belonged solely to them. When she entered their apartment now, she did so with the comfort of someone who knew the way by heart, hanging her coat near the door and greeting Lily with a warmth that felt almost familial. One Saturday morning, Eleanor invited Daniel and Lily to join her on a visit to a small art fair held inside a community center near the lake. The building hummed with soft chatter and the rustle of winter coats being shed as people browsed the displays. Local artists had arranged their work on simple tables, each piece reflecting the quiet pride of someone who created from the heart. Lily moved from booth to booth with wide-eyed excitement. She studied handmade pottery, tiny watercolors of downtown Madison, and delicate jewelry crafted from polished stones. Eleanor walked beside her, gently guiding her through the crowd while Daniel followed a few steps behind, watching how effortlessly they flowed together. At one booth, an elderly man showcased wooden carvings of birds and small houses. Lily paused, studying a little wooden cabin with windows etched carefully into the sides. "Look, Daddy," she whispered, lifting it gently. "It looks like a home that glows inside." Daniel smiled, touched by her description. Eleanor stepped closer and admired the carving too. The man behind the table noticed their interest and explained that he carved each piece during the long winter nights. His voice carried the warmth of someone who had lived many quiet seasons and found peace in simple creations. Eleanor purchased the little cabin for Lily, though she insisted it was because the child had chosen a piece that spoke to her heart. Lily hugged it with both hands, holding it as though she had discovered something precious. Later that afternoon, the three of them walked along a narrow path outside the center. Patches of grass peeked through the melting snow, and the lake shimmered under the pale light. Lily skipped ahead with the wooden cabin pressed close to her chest, humming softly. Daniel and Eleanor followed side by side, their steps slow and unhurried. "She is happy today," Daniel said. Eleanor glanced at Lily fondly. "Children recognize when they are surrounded by kindness. She feels safe with you, and she makes me feel something I have not felt in years." Daniel looked at her, unsure of her meaning. She continued gently, "Being around you and Lily reminds me of a life I once hoped for but never believed belonged to me." Her words drifted through the cool air, settling deep in Daniel's chest. He hesitated, searching for the right response. Before he could speak, she stopped walking, turning toward him with a softness he had grown familiar with but never took for granted. "Daniel, I hope you know that your world is not small. It is full of heart. It is full of meaning. Being invited into it has become one of the greatest gifts of my life." The sincerity in her voice reached him in a way he could not hide. He felt the truth of her words settle warm and steady within him. He stepped closer, keeping his voice low so Lily would not overhear. "Having you in our lives has brought light back into places I thought were gone for good. You have given us hope again. You have given me hope." Their eyes held one another's gaze for a long moment, a tender understanding forming between them as naturally as the season changing around them. The sound of Lily's laughter floated on the breeze, grounding the moment in gentle reality. Daniel looked toward his daughter, then back at Eleanor, and in that quiet path between melting snow and early spring grass, he realized that the bond growing between them had deepened into something neither of them could ignore anymore. April arrived quietly, brushing Madison with a gentle warmth that coaxed green buds from branches still trembling from winter's touch. The air smelled faintly of damp soil and early blossoms, the kind of fragrance that makes people believe in fresh starts. For Daniel, the shift in the season felt almost symbolic, as though nature itself mirrored the changes growing steadily in his life. One early afternoon, Eleanor invited Daniel and Lily to walk through a small park near the lake where spring flowers had begun to push up through soft earth. Lily skipped ahead, her wooden cabin tucked safely inside her coat pocket, as though it were a charm guiding her through each new discovery. Daniel and Eleanor followed along the winding path, their steps moving in comfortable harmony. They stopped at a bench overlooking the water, where gentle ripples carried reflections of drifting clouds. Lily climbed onto the seat and began arranging pebbles into a shape only she understood, humming softly as she worked. Daniel and Eleanor remained standing a moment longer, simply taking in the calm. "You both make this season feel different," Eleanor said quietly. Daniel turned toward her, noticing the thoughtful softness in her eyes. "Different in a good way, I hope." She smiled faintly. "In the best way. Spring always felt like another deadline to meet or another project to finish, but now it feels like a new beginning instead of another checkpoint." Daniel absorbed her words, knowing how much weight they carried for someone who spent years climbing her way through expectations and endless responsibilities. The idea that their presence softened her world made warmth spread through him. They joined Lily on the bench, watching her tap two stones together as though they were tiny drums. After a moment, Daniel shifted his gaze toward the lake. "I have been thinking about what you said last month, about my old work. It has been on my mind more than I expected." Eleanor listened attentively, encouraging him without interrupting. He continued slowly. "I stopped believing that part of my life could still matter. Losing that job felt like losing a piece of myself. But lately, I find myself wanting to try again. Not the same way as before, not chasing big projects, just designing something honest, something that helps people." Eleanor's expression warmed, touched by the quiet courage behind his words. "You still carry the heart of a designer. I can hear it every time you talk about your work, and I believe you can find your way back to it." Before Daniel could answer, Lily looked up from her pebble creation. "Daddy, Miss Eleanor, look." She pointed proudly at a long, winding row of stones shaped like a bridge stretching across the bench. "It is a bridge," she explained, "for people who want to cross from sad days to happy ones." Her words hit Daniel with unexpected force. Eleanor glanced at him, her eyes shimmering with tenderness. "Children have a way of seeing truths we overlook," she said. Daniel reached out and smoothed Lily's hair gently. "You made a beautiful bridge, sweetheart." Lily grinned, then leaned against Eleanor with contentment, as naturally as if she had always belonged by her side. Eleanor wrapped an arm lightly around her, careful and gentle, as though she understood the weight of being trusted by a child. They continued their walk as the afternoon sun warmed the path. Birds called softly from budding branches, and the breeze carried hints of the season shifting. The three of them moved together with a sense of quiet unity, every step threading another line through the connection forming between their lives. When they reached the park's exit, Eleanor paused, turning to Daniel with a steady, meaningful gaze. "Whatever comes next, I hope you know I want to walk through it with you, not as an observer, as someone who cares deeply." Daniel felt the truth of her words settle firmly in his heart. He met her gaze, speaking with a calm certainty he had not felt since before life turned upside down. "I want that too, more than I can say." Lily slipped her hands into theirs without a word, linking them together with innocent simplicity. And under the warm April sun, with the lake behind them and new blossoms stirring at their feet, the three of them stepped forward as though something unspoken and beautiful was finally ready to bloom. By late April, spring had settled gently over Madison. Trees along the lakeside unfurled soft green leaves, and flower beds near Capitol Square burst into color as tulips swayed lightly in the breeze. The lingering chill of winter gave way to milder winds that carried the sweet scent of blooming earth. It was the kind of season that made even the busiest passerby slow down to breathe in the renewed life around them. Daniel felt the shift deeply. Where once he had walked with his shoulders curved inward beneath the weight of loss and responsibility, he now carried himself with a steadier presence. The past had shaped him, but it no longer held him hostage. Eleanor's gentle influence had eased that grip, reminding him that healing does not erase old wounds, but it helps them soften enough to let life bloom again. On a bright Sunday afternoon, Eleanor asked Daniel and Lily to meet her at Prairie Lantern Café. The familiar lanterns glowed warmly even in daylight, their copper surfaces catching the sun through the windows. The cafe looked almost exactly as it had on that snowy Christmas Eve, yet everything felt different now. Instead of anxiety and uncertainty, Daniel felt anticipation stirred gently inside him. Janet greeted them with her usual warm smile, wiping her hands on her apron as she led them to the small table near the window, the same table where everything began. It carried the memory of a night that changed each of their paths forever. Lily pressed her face to the glass for a moment, admiring the flower boxes outside. Daniel helped her into her seat before settling into his own. Eleanor arrived moments later, her cream-colored coat catching the light as she stepped inside. She carried a quiet radiance that Daniel had come to recognize, a calm glow that appeared whenever she was around the two people who made her heart feel steady. Janet brought their drinks with a smile that sparkled with understanding. Peppermint tea for Eleanor, hot chocolate for Lily, a simple dark roast for Daniel. Then she moved away, leaving them in the gentle hush of the afternoon crowd. Daniel lifted his cup with a grateful nod. "You wanted to meet here today. Something special on your mind." Eleanor drew a slow breath, her eyes reflecting both warmth and resolve. "I have been thinking about that night. The night you ran through a snowstorm to meet me, even though everything stood in your way." Daniel felt emotion stir, the memory as vivid as the lantern glow that evening. "You showed me something that night," she continued. "You showed me what it means to show up with honesty, even when life is messy. And since then, you have shown me that love grows quietly, not through grand gestures, but through steady steps." She reached into her coat pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his throat. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by a tremor of emotion he could not hide. Eleanor opened the box gently. Inside was a simple ring, elegant yet modest, the kind chosen by someone who valued meaning over display. "Daniel," she said softly, "I have built many things in my life. Homes, spaces, entire futures for people I barely knew. But I have never built a life with someone I loved, not until now. I want to walk beside you, not ahead of you or behind you. The three of us have become something that feels like home." Lily looked up, her eyes wide with wonder. "Miss Eleanor, are you asking Daddy to marry you?" A warm laugh escaped Eleanor before she answered. "Yes, dear, I am asking him." Daniel felt the world steady itself. He reached across the table, gently taking Eleanor's hands in his. His voice trembled with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "I thought love had passed me by. I thought my path had narrowed to only responsibility and survival. But you brought light back into our home. You made me believe in possibilities again." He paused, eyes glistening. "Yes, yes, Eleanor, with all my heart, yes." Lily clapped her hands with joy, leaning across the table to wrap her arms around them both. The café filled with soft smiles from nearby tables. Even Janet dabbed her eyes with the corner of her apron. Later that evening, the three of them walked along the lakeshore as the sun lowered behind the horizon. Lily skipped ahead, humming under her breath, holding the small wooden cabin Eleanor had framed for her. Daniel and Eleanor walked side by side, their hands intertwined with a quiet understanding that they now shared the same road. Life would not always be simple. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and days weighed down by work or tired hearts. But they had found something rare, a love built on truth, a connection formed through patience, a family created not by perfection but by presence. As the sky shifted from gold to soft indigo, Daniel whispered, "Thank you for waiting that night." Eleanor leaned gently against him. "Some things are worth waiting for." The breeze carried their words across the water, leaving a peaceful stillness behind them. And for anyone listening to their story, the message remained clear. Love does not always arrive on time. It arrives when the heart is finally open enough to receive it, when courage outweighs fear, when two lives discover they are better when walked together.